Welcome to the Treasury Talk podcast, dedicated to demystifying public school finance in the state of Ohio. Before we dive into today's topic, we always start by grounding our conversation in the district's purpose by reading the district mission. The mission of the Kettering City Schools, in partnership with the family and community, is to guarantee a superior educational experience for all students by providing a positive and innovative learning environment while responsibly utilizing our resources. I'm your host, Justin Blevins, the Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer for Kettering City School District. My primary role is to ensure the responsible management of every taxpayer dollar to support our district mission. This podcast series is designed to peel back the layers of school funding, budgeting, and financial planning, giving you, our community stakeholders, transparent access to where your money goes and how those funds directly support the goals and operations of our district, featuring guests who impact these decisions. Today we're focusing on understanding school district levies, and I'm thrilled to be joined by a critical voice in our district. Please welcome Mr. Mark Martin, who currently serves as our district's board president. Mark, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Justin. Thank you for having me.
For our listeners, Mr. Martin is instrumental in providing governance for the district, presiding over meetings, setting the agenda, and serving as the public face of the board. Mark, would you like to give a summary of your service to the district?
Sure, Justin. Thank you. Been in the district for, as far as on the board, for the last 5 years. Seems like it's been a lifetime, but who's counting? Outside of that, I'm a Kettering resident. Been here, me and my wife, and we raised 2 sons. Both our sons are graduates of Kettering City Schools. Went all the way from Beavertown through Fairmont. And we've been in the Kettering area for over 25 years. So it's home. We live, work, and play right here in Kettering.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Mark, our topic today is school district levies, which can be the most complex and often confusing part of school finance for any community. From your perspective, working directly with the public, what do you feel is the most confusing part of community members, or rather for community members, when it comes to understanding why and how we approach school levies?
Thank you for starting there, Justin. I think people struggle to understand why there are different types of levies, but most importantly, why we come back to the voters so frequently with requests for renewal or new money. If property values are going up, people assume the revenue is keeping pace, and that's often where the confusion begins.
Yeah, and that assumption is understandable, and it kind of gets right to the heart of Ohio school funding law. We have multiple different fundamental tax levies, but for simplicity, we'll focus on 2, the operating levies and then bond levies. Bond levies are straightforward. They're exclusively for long-term capital projects like new buildings, land acquisition, and major renovations. They're fixed until the debt is paid off and cannot be used for operating expenses. While on the other hand, operating levies, those are the ones that fund our day-to-day operations of the district, such as salaries, programs, utilities. A lot of times we use the analogy or say it's the use of teachers' tires and textbooks. This is where state law introduces the critical constraint known as House Bill 920. Can you remind our listeners what the outcome of that constraint is and why we have to manage its impact so closely?
Absolutely. I'll do the best that I can. Essentially, the state limits how much our operating revenue can grow. When property values increase, House Bill 920 steps in and reduces the tax millage so the district only receives the amount that was voted on when the levy passed, or voted in when the levy passed. Therefore, as property values increase, the effective millage decreases and the school sees only small, limited revenue growth through inside millage and new construction.
Exactly. So when the county auditor's reappraisal increases property values, House Bill 920 mandates a millage rollback. The operating millage rate is automatically reduced so that the school district receives roughly the same amount of money, or the fixed dollar amount originally approved by voters, through whatever millage rate was passed, plus revenue from new construction. And this prevents the district's operating revenue from growing automatically with inflation or market appreciation, which is why schools repeatedly seek operating renewals or new levies just to maintain current service levels in the face of rising costs. Mark, To elaborate and help our listeners understand that a bit more, can you explain what people mean when they talk about the staircase model of school funding?
Sure, Justin. The staircase model is really just a simple way to picture how school funding works in Ohio. Imagine each time a district passes a levy, it creates a flat step on a staircase. That step represents the amount of money the levy brings in. Because of state law, that levy amount stays basically the same year after year. It doesn't grow with inflation or rising costs. Meanwhile, the district's expenses, things like salaries, utilities, classroom materials, keep increasing over time. Eventually, those rising costs reach the point where they are higher than the flat revenue from that levy. When that happens, the district starts dipping into savings. And once those savings get too low, it has to ask the community to approve another levy. The new levy creates the next step on the staircase. So the model shows this repeating cycle. Revenue stays level, cost climbs, and even every so often, the district has to ask voters for another levy to catch up. That's why levy requests appear on the ballot regularly. It's built into how Ohio funds its schools.
That image is a perfect visual for the issue. Now let's pivot to the source of that revenue. The state of Ohio is constitutionally required to provide a thorough and efficient system of schools, yet our district relies heavily on local property taxes. Can you clarify the relationship between the state foundation funding formula and our need for local levies?
Sure, Justin, I'll do my best. This is perhaps the most critical distinction for our community. While the state provides foundation funding, it uses a formula that measures the local district's capacity to raise its own funds. Because we have a higher property tax valuation base than many other districts in Ohio, the state formula determines we have a high capacity to fund ourselves. Therefore, the state contributes a lower percentage to the total operating budget here in Kettering. That low state contribution means we have to rely heavily on local levies, our own property taxes, in other words, to make up the difference between make up the difference and fund our schools adequately. Essentially, our local strength means we receive less state aid, making stable local levies absolutely vital.
Mark, thanks for framing it that way. Given our heavy reliance on local funding, which was at 71% for fiscal year 2025, what does that mean for the board's fiduciary responsibility regarding operational levies versus bond levies?
Great question. The board has to treat those two types of levies very differently. Our fiduciary duty for operating levies is about maintaining financial stability and educational quality, making sure we don't fall into deficit spending by planning ahead for the next step, quote steps, on the staircase. If you go back to our staircase model or analogy. Our fiduciary duty for bond levies is also very strict. By law, we must ensure the bond money is only ever used for purposes specified in the bond's language: new buildings, land acquisition, or major renovations, depending on the bond. We must always keep those funds strictly separate from operating funds, which means bond funds cannot be used for operational costs. If a citizen has questions about how funds are being managed, they can look at our financial forecast on the website, which explicitly separates the operational funds from the bond debt funds.
We've seen a lot of recent legislative activity, including tax relief bills. As the board president, how does this environment of constantly shifting state legislation and uncertain future operational revenue impact the board's long-term financial planning?
Another great question. It makes long-term commitments extremely challenging. For instance, when we plan for a multi-year project like our master facilities plan, we have to isolate the bond millage completely because we know our operating budget will be stressed. The recent tax relief bills, while beneficial to homeowners, I'll acknowledge, primarily target operating or inside millage, not bond debt. This reinforces our responsibility to always present the facts clearly. The cost of a new project is fixed, while the rest of a homeowner's tax bill is constantly changing due to state action. It's a complex picture, and that's why this Treasury talk is so important.
Mark, thanks again for sharing your perspective on school levies. What is one final takeaway or action item you would recommend to our stakeholders as they engage with the district's financial information?
Another great question. My recommendation is to collaborate with, our leadership team. We've put out a lot of information on the websites. We're trying to be completely transparent with the community members, the stakeholders, what's going on, why we're approaching certain things, and ultimately, you had a great insight in creating Treasury Talk so that we can have another vehicle to inform and in some regards educate our citizens on the rules and regulations that affect schools and how schools can generate revenue and where they can apply those dollars. But ultimately, touch base on our website where there's tons of information that you can download, you can read. It takes you to various documents that are out there. Spend time emailing Justin, emailing you, emailing Mindy to ask questions, but ultimately also engaging with the board members. We're here to hear what the concerns are in the community and take that feedback to the team and really try and understand how we can be better and perform better for Kettering to make it the best place to be for education and raising families.
Before we wrap up, I want to dedicate a few moments to what we call our Finance Fundamentals Check-In. Understanding these core data points is essential for every stakeholder in our district. First, let's look at the funding ratio. The district's general fund budget relies on a mix of local property taxes and state aid. Local funding made up approximately 71% of total revenue in fiscal year 2025. This comes primarily from local property tax levies. State funding made up approximately 24% of total revenue in fiscal year 2025. This comes primarily through the state foundation formula. Total revenues for fiscal year 2025 general fund were just under $134 million. Second, our annual budget. Our general fund operating budget for fiscal year 2025 was just over $122 million. Of that total, 84% went toward people, the salaries and benefits of everyone who works in the district. Another 11% covered purchase services, which are things we have to pay outside companies or organizations for, like utilities or specialized student services. The remaining 5% went toward other everyday needs such as classroom supplies and materials. Third, the financial planning tool. Every public school district in Ohio is required to file a financial forecast. This isn't just a budget, it's a look ahead that details our revenue projections and expenditure assumptions for the next several years. This tool is fundamental to proactive financial management, ensuring the district avoids deficit spending and maintaining public accountability. We use it to project future stability and service needs, which directly informs the board's decisions on future funding requests. This document is publicly available on our website as well as on the Department of Education's site. To our listeners, we hope this episode has provided valuable insight into school finance. Remember that transparency is a core pillar of the Treasurer's Office, and we encourage you to visit the district website at www.ketteringschools.org for the latest financial forecasts, audit reports, and budget details. Join us next time on Treasury Talk. Thank you for listening, and go Birds.
This podcast is produced by the Kettering City School District for informational and educational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official position of the Board of Education or the district. Any discussion of Ohio public school funding or district finances is general in nature. It should not be considered legal, financial, or tax advice. Listeners should consult official district communications or appropriate professionals for specific guidance. Information shared in this episode is accurate as of the date of the recording. Please note that details may change due to updates in law, policy, or guidance from the state of Ohio, including the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. This podcast does not advocate for or against any ballot issue or candidate. This episode was recorded and produced by students in the Interactive Media program at the Kettering Fairmont Career Technology Center as part of their educational coursework. As a public school district, please be aware that certain communications may be subject to Ohio public record laws. Copyright 2026, Kettering City School District, all rights reserved.